I've had Snapchat ever since I was 13. I'm a sophomore in high school, and I've accumulated quite a lot of friends on the app over the years. I use Snapchat every day and have streaks with at least 20 different friends. For those who don't know, a streak on Snapchat is when you and another person consecutively send pictures or videos to each other at least once every 24 hours for a consecutive amount of days. Just recently, I checked the added me list on my Snapchat account and noticed that there were several accounts that added me. I usually never add people I don't know on there, but I added back the people who added me from quick ads since they had pretty legit looking Bitmojis, which are cartoon faces made by the account owners to resemble their real life face. They also had mutual friends, which means some of my friends on Snapchat have added them as well. I added about 5 or 6 accounts back and went on with my day. Snapchat also has this setting where you can make your location public to your friends, so you can always see if any of your friends are by you if you go somewhere. I've kept this setting turned on since most of my friends had theirs turned on. Anyways, a few days went by, and I never talked to any of the new friends on the app. Later that week, after I got home from soccer practice, I received a snap from one of the new friends that I added back named Jake. He sent me a random picture of the road, which looked like he took while driving a car. It was a little strange and out of the ordinary, but I sent him back a picture of the textbook I had open up on my desk since I was working on homework. My first instinct was to not reply, but I didn't want to come across as a jerk and leave him unopened. He replied almost instantly, but I decided I'd wait a couple hours to reply since it kind of felt awkward. By the time I finished my homework, it was around 9:30 and I was getting tired. I opened Snapchat and sent my streaks to my friends. Afterwards, I opened Jake's Snapchat and it was the same picture of the road like before. I sent him a streak in case he wanted to be friends, and once again, he replied instantly. I opened the app. It was dark and rainy out, so it was hard to see, but the picture looked like it was taken in a neighborhood. I replied by sending him a picture of my room and went to sleep. I was exhausted and fell asleep pretty quickly. I was awakened in the middle of the night to my phone going off. I grabbed it off my nightstand and looked, wiping the sleep from my eyes. As my eyes adjusted to the bright light of the phone, I saw that Jake had called me 3 times on Snapchat and sent me a bunch of messages. To be honest, it creeped me out and I wondered why he was doing this. My plan was to open the messages and see what he wanted, and then most likely block him. I opened the text messages he sent me first. He sent 3 messages, which all said, "Hey." I shook my head, confused and annoyed at this point. After that, I opened the pictures he sent. There were 4. The first one was the same picture of the road in the rain. The second one was a little more distinct, and it looked like a house in my neighborhood, but I couldn't quite tell. The third picture literally made my skin turn cold. It was a picture of my house, taken from inside a car parked on the street. Completely shocked, I just stared at it as I tried to convince myself it wasn't my house or I was in some kind of crazy dream. As the 10-second timer counted down, it automatically went to the next picture, which completely terrified me. It was a picture of my kitchen, taken from inside the house. As the picture disappeared from my screen, it took me back to the chat, where it showed his Bitmoji in the bottom corner of the screen, which meant he was just sitting there in the chat, watching me open each picture. I did the only thing I felt I could do, and I screamed, and ran into my parents' room and woke them up. It took me a minute to get them to fully understand the situation since I kept fumbling over my words. My dad got up and went downstairs, yelling that anyone down there needs to leave. My mom and I followed a short distance behind, completely horrified. After searching the house, we didn't find anyone, but we found clear evidence of someone being in the house. The door to our screen patio was busted, which allowed easy access to whoever came inside. We also found wet footprints all across the main floor and even partially up the stairs. We called the police and they arrived, conducting a full investigation. I had to hand over my phone so they could retrieve any evidence and find out who this person was. Even after months of investigating, the police were unable to identify the intruder. The device that Jake, or whoever the person was who used it to Snapchat me, was found in my backyard. It was an iPad that belonged to the city library that was reported stolen a couple weeks ago. Whoever it was knew what they were doing, and they were able to scramble the location on the device, making its last known locations impossible to track. Ever since that happened, I deleted Snapchat and made a new account, where I only add people that I know. I also have turned off my Snapchat location and will never turn it on again. I'm lucky that I woke up when I did. If I hadn't, who knows what would have happened. This story happened during my first year of college. It was nearing the end of the first semester, and I was preparing for finals week. I was living in a dormitory located directly across from the engineering building, which was convenient since I was an engineering major. I shared a room with my friend named Harley, but he was packing up to go back home for good. I guess college wasn't working out for him, and he dropped out during the last week of the first semester. Anyways, Christmas break passed, and the new year began. I was optimistic as the second semester approached, looking forward to completing my first year of college in just a few months. My school notified me, letting me know that I'd be getting a new roommate for the second semester. Once break ended, I headed back to the dorm and unloaded my clothes, preparing for my new dorm mate to arrive the next day. I also spent some time cleaning up since I didn't want to come across as a slob for his first impression. I probably fell asleep around 11 that night, until I was startled awake by a knock. I partially woke up, but quickly started to drift back asleep. That's when I heard it again, this time much louder. I got up and walked to the door, where I looked through the peephole to see someone standing on the other side. I opened the door, groggily saying, "Hi, can I help you?" The stranger replied, "Hi, I'm Ricky. This is my dorm." "Oh," I said, "I thought you weren't coming until tomorrow." He ignored me and walked right past me into the dorm. It felt pretty awkward and uncomfortable being in the room with a stranger. He gave off some weird vibes, but I tried to never judge a book by its cover. Some time passed, and as he got settled, I said, "I'm going to bed. Good night." I went back into my room, and as I laid down, I noticed that someone named Emmy added me on Snapchat. I didn't know anyone named Emmy, so I looked her username up on Instagram to see if it was a legitimate account. I found an account with the same username that had over 1,000 followers and my college's name in the bio. The account was private, but it looked pretty legit. I assumed that Emmy was probably a mutual friend or something, so I added her back. The next morning, I woke up to my alarm clock to see that I had 2 Snapchats from her. I opened them up. One was a picture of the main campus building, and the other was a text that said, "Hey." I responded back saying, "Hey, what's up?" And to my surprise, she instantly opened the snap and replied. We chatted on and off throughout the day, and she seemed like a cool person. She asked a lot about my life, like what I'm studying and what kind of music I like. We seemed to get along pretty well. Anyways, when I got home later that night, I continued to get strange vibes from Ricky. As soon as I walked in the door, I heard the door to Ricky's room slam shut. I didn't understand what his deal was, but I wrote it off as just him being shy. I walked into my room and got myself ready for bed. As I reached into my bag, I noticed that some of the clothes I folded in my suitcase were bunched up and wrinkly. I knew I definitely didn't do that, and instantly wondered if Ricky went through my stuff when I was gone. I went to bed and fell asleep pretty quickly. After I got home from my first day of class, I relaxed in the living room and Snapchatted Emmy, who was sending me pictures of the lecture hall she was in at the time. After she stopped responding for a bit, I grabbed a bite to eat and sat down in the living room. Then Ricky walked in through the door. I greeted him, hoping to make conversation since we've talked for maybe a minute total ever since I met him, but he headed straight for his room and locked the door after acknowledging me with a nod. I didn't know why he acted so weird, and didn't understand why he didn't even want to get to know me, considering we were living together. It seemed really strange that he wouldn't even talk to me. I definitely didn't want to go an entire semester feeling uncomfortable with some stranger I didn't even know on a casual basis. That night, I laid in bed and had a hard time falling asleep. I tossed and turned, but couldn't get comfortable. The dorm was freezing cold because Ricky kept putting pillows over the vents. I usually would have taken them off, but his distant persona made me uncomfortable to ask if I could move them. As I lay there thinking about how weird he was, I heard the door creak open in my room. I tried to slow my breathing and close my eyes, trying to act like I was asleep. I listened carefully as I heard the floorboards silently creak as I opened one eye to see that Ricky was in my room. I watched as he bent over and started going through my suitcase in the corner. I was really freaked out and didn't want to risk something bad happening if I asked what he was doing. After a couple minutes, he tiptoed out of my room and closed the door. Now I was wide awake. My mind raced, wondering what he possibly could have been doing in my room, especially in the middle of the night. I Snapchatted Emmy, telling her what happened, but she didn't respond and I assumed she was sleeping. Hours passed, and I ended up getting out of bed. I went in the kitchen and made some ramen, trying to calm myself down. As I was eating at the table, I noticed that Ricky's door was wide open. The light from the kitchen projected into his room and I could see his nightstand. I texted Emmy again telling her that I was still up because of my creepy and weird dorm mate. Just as I sent that snap to her, a faint light radiated off of Ricky's nightstand in his room. I instantly got up and walked a few feet closer until I was just outside his room where I could make out that it was his phone. I slowly crept into his room and grabbed it off the nightstand. I took it back outside to the living room area where I sat back down and tapped on his screen. As it lit up, I felt myself turn pale as I read the screen. There were 2 Snapchat notifications from me. I set the phone down on the kitchen table and went straight to my room. I locked the door and packed up every single belonging of mine into the suitcase and bags I had. As I walked by his room, I could see Ricky moving around in his bed, realizing he was awake. Just as I was about to leave, I heard him get up. He said, "Where's my phone?" in a very serious tone. I didn't respond and left the dorm as quickly and quietly as possible and never returned. I stopped by my friend's dorm, who lived in a complex across the street, and stayed with him for the night. The next day, I requested a dorm change to the school and I eventually got it. I'll never know what Ricky's plan was, but I'm thankful I'll never have to find out. My name is Bailey, and I'm a 24-year-old girl. I recently moved into a new apartment because of some problems I had with my old neighbor. I'll try to keep this part short. He was in his mid-40s. One morning, when I was leaving to go to work, I noticed him staring at me through his window as I'd walk to my car. Then, like clockwork, as time went on, I'd peer at his window through the corner of my eye as I'd walk to my car, and he'd be there, staring. His antics progressed and got weirder. One night as I was falling asleep, I heard someone buzz to my room from the vestibule. I thought it was weird, obviously not expecting anyone over. I opened my door and crept down the hallway to see who it was. As I peeked around the corner down the staircase, I was met with the eyes of the guy who'd always stare at me. He creepily smiled at me and waved. I didn't want to make things weirder than they already were, so I walked up to the other side of the locked glass door and said, "Can I help you?" He hesitated, but replied saying, "Hello, may I come inside?" I think we should be friends. It was very strange, and I thought how it was pretty creepy given the situation. I gave him the benefit of the doubt and tried to think that he was just being nice, and I politely said, "I'm sorry, I can't tonight. I need to go to sleep." In response, he punched the glass door and yelled at me, telling me to let him in. His response sent me flying back into the staircase behind. I ran up back to my room and locked the door. I sat there freaked out knowing that I had a psychotic stalker neighbor. I ended up finding a new apartment since I didn't feel safe. It was 20 minutes further away from my work, but it was worth it since I didn't have to deal with him anymore. Anyways, some time passed and I was finally adjusted to the stalker-free apartment. One morning, as I was getting ready for work, I got a notification on my phone that someone added me on Snapchat. I opened it up and saw that it was my old friend Hanson, who I was really good friends with back in high school. I added him back, and we struck up a conversation for the first time in years. We snapped back and forth all day, and he eventually asked if I wanted to hang out next Friday. I said that I'd love to, and I suggested that we should go out to the old bowling alleys we used to hang out at on the weekends in high school. Once Friday came, Hanson said that he could pick me up at 7:30, so I got ready in my apartment. At about 7:20, I looked at my phone and realized I forgot to give him my address. When I opened the app to message him, I realized he sent me a black screen snap saying, "Here, no rush," at 7:15. I snapped him back saying, "Geez, dude, how do you know where I live? LOL. He replied with another black screen saying, "I just used your Snapchat location and it took me to you." Despite being a little creeped out, I checked and realized I had my Snapchat location on, which was strange since I don't remember turning it on in the first place. I walked out to the front, where I saw the white Honda Civic he said he'd be driving. It was dark outside and the windows were tinted, which made it impossible to see into the car. I walked towards the passenger side door, and just as I was about 5 feet away, the driver's side door opened and Hanson got out. He started walking around the car to me, like he was going to open my door for me. It caught me by surprise since it didn't seem like something Hanson would do, considering we were always just friends in high school. As I got closer, I started to notice how Hanson looked different. He seemed taller than I remembered him. As I got closer, I was finally able to make out his face a little better, and that's when I realized it wasn't Hanson. I initially assumed I had the wrong car, so I stopped and apologized, telling the guy that I thought he was someone else. The guy looked up and made direct eye contact with me. It was the stalker from my old apartment. I screamed and sprinted as fast as I could towards the vestibule. He chased after me, yelling at me to stop. As soon as I got inside, I darted up the stairs to my room. When I got to the top of the staircase, I turned to see him running to the door just as it was about to shut. He managed to wedge his hand in the door so it wouldn't lock, and it flew open. Everybody in the apartment probably heard me screaming as I sprinted towards my room and fumbled around with the key. I opened the door and closed it behind me, hearing the approaching footsteps of the guy chasing after me. Just as I got in, I managed to lock the door chain before he hurled himself at my door. The door wasn't fully locked, so it was partially open. The door chain was the only thing keeping me safe from him. He shouted at me to let him in, as I pushed as hard as I could to get the door to shut all the way. He reached his hand through the slight opening in the door, but this time I was able to slam my body weight into it, crushing his hand. The neighbors must have heard the commotion, and a couple guys came out and threatened him, which scared him off. I felt like my heart was beating 1,000,000 times per second, and I thanked them for helping me. I went to the police and was able to get a restraining order put on him, and I plan on taking him to court this spring. I'm very lucky that I got away from him. If there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's to always make sure you know who you're talking to online, especially before meeting up.